Hello and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new here. Today I will be sharing all the books that I read in February. So in February I read 6 books in total, which is pretty good. Like I said back in the very beginning of this year, my goal for each month was to read at least 4 books, so I surpassed that goal still this month, so I'm very happy about that. And all the books I read this month were so good. I just feel like I'm on a roll lately with the quality of my books. Every single thing I'm reading is hitting for me. I didn't read anything under a 4-star this month, so that is amazing. I've just been really loving everything I'm reading, so I'm really glad that I am picking the right books. I feel like lately I've been able to narrow down what exactly I'm looking for when it comes to what I want in my books, and that's really showing because I'm really picking the right books that are keeping me hooked. So it's just been an amazing reading month. So I'm really looking forward to talking about all these books. So let's just get right into it. So 6 books is still a good amount of books to read in a month, but the reason that I read just 6 books this month is because I was really trying to get through a pretty dense series that all the books are over like 500 pages, and you can probably guess what series that is because I've been talking about it a lot, and I mentioned that it was my priority to get started on this series this month, and that is Fourth Wing, the Emperor, how do you pronounce it, guys? The Empyrean series. I butcher that so badly. Oh my god. So yeah, I started on this series this month. This book, Fourth Wing, the first book, was a reread for me. And the first time I read it, I gave it a 4 stars. But the second time I read it, y'all, I gave it a 5 stars. So I loved it even more upon reread. So let's just talk about all my thoughts. I will explain what the series is about, although I'm pretty sure most people know what it's about because it's so popular. But just in case you don't know, I will talk about what this series is about. So this series follows Violet, who is forced to enter the Writer's Quadrant by her mother at Basgiath War College, where she has to go through trials in order to bond with a dragon. And she has a target on her back initially right when she gets there because her mother is kind of a leader in this world, and she was responsible for the execution of a lot of the people who were rebellious towards the kingdom of Navarre, and a lot of the children of those rebellious people go to this school, and so they don't like Violet because of who her mother is, because she executed a lot of their parents. And Xaden is one of those children of the rebellious group who initially does target Violet because her mother had his father killed. But Xaden ends up training Violet to become stronger as a dragon rider, and as the two spend a lot of time together, they get to know each other more, and a connection starts brewing between them. So this series had always been one that I was nervous to get into because it's so popular, and I was afraid it was going to be overhyped, but it really isn't. I've only read the first 2 books in this series so far, but I have a feeling it's going to be a series that is going to stick with me for all time. Violet's growth throughout this series so far, from what I've read, is so astronomical. She is someone who doesn't have a lot of physical strength backing her at first. She is incredibly smart. Initially, she was supposed to be a part of the scribe quadrant of this world, where she just keeps track of the library archives. So she always grew up with a lot of wits about her, but not physical strength because of that. But as we read this book and as this goes on, we start to see her become more physically strong. But not only that, she uses her brains as her strength in a lot of ways. So her strength really is coming from something different than her fellow students, which I really love to see. And her determination to survive in this world really made me root for her. Xaden is someone who initially comes off as very shady, but you start to realize how noble he is. He's had to harden himself in so many ways in order to protect his people while they're in the brutal land of Navarre where they're so hated, and he's had to be the protector for them. So he doesn't have a lot of opportunities to really think of himself and his own well-being, and throughout this book I just wanted him to feel love because you really start to care for him, and in ways he starts to receive that love from Violet, and I loved seeing that and seeing their relationship grow from that. I absolutely loved seeing their relationship go from resentful to just this mutual respect that they have for each other. Their relationship definitely starts off as lustful, like really lustful, but what I really, really loved is how subtle the emotional dynamic between these two started to build up, and you could kind of start to see through their lust and begin to realize that these two actually do care for each other. There's a lot of scenes that show that these two actually have a lot of deep love for each other, and that really just made for a beautifully written romance. I also adore the dragons in this series. Each of the dragons that we meet have such individual personalities, and this is actually the first book I have ever read that features dragons in it, which is crazy because I'm sure there's so many other fantasy books out there that have dragons, but this is like the first one I have read with dragons in it, and I would not be opposed to reading more dragon fantasy books because I just loved all the dragons in this book and getting to know them. I think it made for a very interesting world. I think the pacing in the first book was really, really well done. A lot of it was so well written. I was constantly left wanting more after each chapter. The first time I read this, I thought the beginning was slow, but the second time I read it, I was actually pretty gripped from the start. So I don't know why I thought the beginning was so slow when I first read this, but I definitely enjoyed it the second time upon reread. It was just a very solid book. If you are hesitant to pick up this series because you're thinking maybe it's overhyped, I would say give it a chance, and I did give it 5 stars upon reread. And I enjoyed the second book too, which I'm going to talk about right now because I went right into the second book after reading Fourth Wing, and the second one is Iron Flame. So I did enjoy the sequel. Did I love it as much as the first book though? No, but I still enjoyed it. I feel like the world continued to remain engrossing in this book, and I feel like the dragons were even more evolved in the sequel, and I loved getting to know about all of them more. And I think Violet's character really takes a turn. She grows even more in this book, and she's really had to harden herself because of all the really trying situations she was put in the first book. She has had to harden herself so much more, and it's really sad to see, but it just shows how much she's grown as a character in the way that she's had to really like shift her perspective and become emotionally stronger to survive in this world. I also feel like a lot of the side characters shined even more in this book. Like, they were great in the first book as well, but I feel like I was able to connect even more to the side characters in the sequel, which is great because connection to side characters is just as important as having a connection to the main characters. So I really loved all the side characters in the sequel specifically. I think my favorite side character has to be Rydick, just because he's like the biggest comic relief in a series where a lot of it is very like depressing to read because of the world that we're in. So having that comic relief is really important. So I just really enjoyed every scene that he's in. What really kind of disappointed me about the sequel though is that the pacing was not as great as it was in the first book. I feel like there were a lot of chapters that could have been taken out. By the last 100 pages, I was just ready for it to end because I felt like we were lingering along in too many scenes that could have been wrapped up way more quickly. So I will say the pacing in this one was not as on point as it was in the first book. Specifically, I really did not like any of the classroom scenes. I found those scenes to be so incredibly boring, and I think the classroom scenes could have been condensed way more, so was not a big fan of those. Another slightly disappointing thing about the sequel is the progression of the romance between Violet and Xaden. I get that a romance needs conflict in order for it to continue to be interesting. However, I hate when miscommunication is used as a source of conflict in a romance. I hate miscommunication, and Violet and Xaden had so many instances of miscommunication in the way that they kept keeping secrets from each other, and after a while, with the amount of secrets that kept on being piling up, I got so irritated. I just wanted them to open up to each other. They should have been open with each other from the start, and Xaden was definitely keeping way more secrets than Violet was, and I was just getting really irritated with him. I feel like this kind of behavior is more fitting for teenagers to be like evasive and secretive with each other, but these two are like in their 20s. Like they should be so much more mature than this. Like, please just communicate with each other. However, I still love the dynamic of their relationship. I feel like you can really tell that they hold a lot of love for each other. So I'm hoping in Onyx Storm that the secrets between them will be gone and that they'll have matured enough in Onyx Storm to be more open with each other from the start. So I'm hoping for that because I did not like the miscommunication in this book at all. The last few pages of this sequel were absolute chaos, and it definitely does leave off on a cliffhanger, so I'm really curious to see what's going to happen in Onyx Storm. Obviously, because I am sane, I'm curious to see what happens in the next book. I did not get to Onyx Storm this month, but I am going to get to it in March, so I will get to see what happens with the rest of the series in March. So I gave Iron Flame 4 out of 5 stars. I did have some issues with it, but it was still good. It was still enjoyable. I think this series overall has just been pretty solid, and I will for sure be continuing on with it this coming month. So I did DNF one book this month, sadly, and even more sad is that this was my TBR jar book pick for the month of February, and I ended up DNFing that book, so that makes it even worse. So that book is My Life Next Door by Huntley Fitzpatrick. This is a young adult contemporary romance. I read the first 30 pages of this one and it just was not capturing my attention, so I decided I'm going to put it down. Like, I only read the first 30 pages, but if right off the bat it is not interesting me, I'm not going to continue. I just found the writing of this one to be very bland. It reads very young. I've been reading a lot of young adult books lately that have not felt like young adult books. I feel like the writing and the characters in them have been pretty mature, but the writing and characters in this one were very immature. And that's just not a sort of genre that I'm into nowadays. I've definitely outgrown books like this. I feel like if I had read this book maybe like 8 years ago, I would have enjoyed it a lot more, but I've definitely outgrown this kind of young adult contemporary romance genre. So I put it down, and I actually featured this in my recent unhaul video because I plan to unhaul this book because I am never going to pick it back up again, so it's going to be going. So yeah, this one was a disappointment. The next book that I read, I actually listened to on audiobook, which is so rare for me because audiobooks are usually not something that I choose to listen to. I'd rather read a physical book. But when it comes to listening to memoirs, I feel more inclined to listen to them on audiobook because pretty much every memoir out there is narrated by the author, so I think it's pretty cool to hear the author's voice while listening to it. So, along with that, I also listened to a memoir this month, which is also something that I don't ever really do. I'm not much of a nonfiction reader, but if there's a memoir out there that is written by an author whose life I am very interested in, I will pick it up. So, that memoir was The House of My Mother by Sherry Frankie. I was very interested to pick this up and listen to it because I am very familiar with the whole story, the saga of the 8 passengers ordeal that has happened within the past few years. So if you do not know, Sherry Frankie is one of the children of Ruby Frankie. And Ruby used to be a YouTuber, and her channel was solely focused on family vlogs. So her channel was called 8 Passengers, and basically the channel was like a family vlog channel. She would just put up videos that showcased her family doing like everyday mundane things, and a lot of the videos would focus on each of the children. But it came to light sometime within the past 2 years that Ruby had been abusing her children. And so in The House of My Mother, the oldest daughter Sherry details her experience with being a part of a family vlog channel, how much she absolutely hated having to be on camera all the time, and how helpless she felt when she found out that her mother was abusing her younger siblings. So this is a very, very deep book. It details a lot of accounts of child abuse, so it is definitely not a book that is going to be for everyone. There's a lot of trigger warnings that do come with this book, obviously, but I thought it was really important to hear Sherry's experience, and I'm so glad she felt comfortable enough to detail what happened to her. She doesn't only detail like the abuse she received from her mother, but she also was groomed as a teenager by an older man, so she details a lot about that situation as well. Her life was just incredibly sad, and I am glad she's in a better place now that she has escaped from her mother. Ruby ended up going to prison recently. I believe she got 30 years, which is like not enough for the pain that she inflicted on her children. It is so freaking upsetting. So this book hit very like close to me because I witnessed the situation as it was unfolding. I'm a chronic YouTube watcher, so I would watch a lot of commentary videos detailing the 8 passengers story and what happened to these kids. So this whole story has been something I've been very familiar with. I really enjoyed listening to this memoir. I give it a 4 out of 5 stars, so it was really solid. And I would recommend this book if you are interested in memoirs and specifically Sherry and her story. I just really enjoyed it. It was a hard read, but I just really loved hearing about this story specifically from her who experienced this and not like an outside source. So it was very interesting. Moving on to something way lighter. So let's lighten the mood now from that last one, because talking about that book almost made me cry. So let's talk about something happier. And so my next book that I read is First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. This was a book that was on my TBR for the month of February, so I'm glad I got to it. And I'm also glad I got to it because this book was so good. This was without a doubt my favorite read of this month. So this one follows Lucy, who is a single mom, and Aiden, who is a radio host of Baltimore's romance hotline, which is Heartstrings. One night, Lucy's daughter, Maya, calls up the show asking Aiden if she could help her mom find love on the show. And after Lucy spills her heart out to Aiden on the phone about what she looks for when it comes to love, the call ends up going viral. And after seeing the potential of what helping Lucy find love on the show could do for the show's ratings, because the call did go viral, the studio asked Lucy if she would like to come on the show so that they could help her find love through screening callers for potential dates for her. And Aiden grows to love having Lucy on the show with him, but the purpose of Lucy being on the show is to help her find love and help her find a date, and that's what Aiden does, but at the same time, he himself is developing feelings for her. I think when I first described the synopsis of this book in my February TBR video, I explained that Aiden falls in love with the daughter of Lucy, and that was completely incorrect. I don't know where I got that from, because Maya, Lucy's daughter, is 12 years old, so no, that did not happen. He actually develops a relationship with the mother, Lucy herself. So I completely butchered the synopsis of this book in my February TBR video, and that was embarrassing. But yeah. Now I properly explained what this book is about. The way this book covers the essence of love, oh my god, it was so relatable. Lucy so deserves a love that is effortless and magical, but she has just failed in that regard so many times and has just not found the one. When she voiced her wants that she wants in a romantic partner on the show through her call with Aiden, the way she detailed everything that she wanted just made me cry. And this is like, I want to say 30 pages into the book. 30 pages into the book, I was crying already because of the way that Lucy explained like what she's looking for in her person that she would like to find. And we're gonna get personal here, but it's hard not to when I'm explaining this book and what I felt towards it. But she just detailed everything that I search for when it comes to hopefully finding someone that I could fall in love with, especially the part where she says, like, point blank, I am so sick of trying so hard for something that comes so easily to others. When she said that line, I had to like take a break and just go through the emotions that I was feeling, because that is the exact thought that I've had so much, specifically lately. I myself am also so sick of trying so hard for something that just, it feels like it comes so easily to others. Like being in love and like finding my person has also just been, like Lucy, it's been something that I've wanted for my entire life. And I am almost 29 now and still single, and I just have been reflecting on that so much lately, because a lot of my friends and a lot of people I know in real life have already like found their person, and I constantly am thinking like, why was it so easy for them to have already found their person and I'm still here just waiting? And I feel like I'm always trying so hard, and I'm dating and it's not working out, and I'm just also sick of just having to try so hard to like find it. And that's something that Lucy goes through as well. I just feel like Lucy and I are the same person. I feel like BK Borison looked into my head specifically and wrote me in this book. And it gives me chills. It gives me chills because I feel like she did that. So I connected to Lucy so much because of her feelings and frustrations that come with not having found her person yet. And I was so rooting for her to just find it throughout this book. And we're also following Aiden, her love interest. And he is very interesting because he is someone who doesn't believe in love at all. And that's because he's scared of the potential heartbreak that could come with falling in love with someone. After his mother's battle with cancer, he saw how much it broke his father, because his father was so heartbroken to see the woman he loved go through pain. And so Aiden has swore that he will never fall in love because he doesn't want to feel any of the heartbreak that comes with loving someone. Like, what if that person gets sick? What if they die and he's left heartbroken because the one he loves is gone or hurting? He just doesn't want to feel that pain, so he avoids love at all costs. And he's also fallen out of the idea of love because of heartstrings, and because he's the host of this romance hotline, because a lot of the callers that call into the show only come on to complain about how bad their relationships are. And so he has started to think, if all he ever hears about through the people who call in are how bad their experiences with love are, then why would he look for it? Because he's only ever exposed to the bad parts about relationships, romantic relationships, and he doesn't want that. So he's like, no, I'm just never gonna fall in love. But that all changes when he meets Lucy, and these two have instant chemistry. I just love them together. I love the tension that came with Aiden having to be put in the position to help Lucy find a date on this show while he is also falling in love with her, because it kind of makes for low-key a forbidden romance, because he's not supposed to be falling in love with her like someone who's calling into the show is supposed to be her romantic partner, but he is falling for her, and so he can't help it. I loved every moment that Aiden showed up for Lucy when she needed him and needed someone to be there for her. Everything that Lucy desired in a man was what Aiden was, like from the very start. And I loved how she slowly started to realize that. And I really loved watching Aiden's walls come down and watching him let Lucy in and letting himself fall for her when he swore that he would never fall in love with anyone, but he can't help himself, and he does. One thing I also have to note is the side characters in this book were so good. I loved Maya's daughter. She was super sweet. And I really loved how Maya has a really great friendship with her baby daddy. Her and Grayson, which is her baby daddy, have been friends since they were children. And then when they were teenagers, he ended up getting her pregnant. They had tried dating at some point during that time, but it didn't work out. But he did end up getting her pregnant, and so she got pregnant very young. So they've had to be in this co-parenting relationship, but at the same time, they have still remained friends, where Maya and Lucy hang out with Grayson and his husband a lot. And I love that because I think that makes for a very positive environment for the child to have both of her parents be on very good terms. And it actually reminded me of my own parents, because I am a child of divorce, but my parents are still friends to this day. So I really loved seeing that representation of like a very great positive co-parenting relationship in this book, because you don't always see that. This book was just so romantic. I love how this book opens up discussions on what a lot of women look for in romantic relationships, because they are such important things that can be really hard to look for in our era of hookup culture. But by highlighting these things that Lucy expresses that she wants in a romantic romantic partner. It opens up discussion on not settling for less than what a lot of us deserve. This book was also inspired by the movie Sleepless in Seattle, which I have never seen before, but now after reading this book, I want to watch that movie. So I'm gonna do that soon because this book definitely made me want to watch it finally. I give this 5 out of 5 stars. It was amazing. Absolute perfection. The next book I read was Credence, and oh my god, this was insane and unique and unlike anything I've ever read before. This had been on my radar for so long, and I'm glad I finally got to it, but oh my god, it blew my mind. So getting into what this one is about. So this one follows Tiernan, whose parents have just died. So her step uncle, who her parents and family are estranged from, so she's never met him before, but he calls her after learning that her parents have died and asks if she wants to stay with him in his house on a mountain peak in Colorado. And since she has no other options on who she can stay with because she's still 17, so she can't live on her own, she decides to move in with him and his 2 sons. Tiernan grew up feeling very neglected by her parents because they never paid attention to her. So when her uncle Jake and her 2 sons, Caleb and Noah, start showing her a lot of love and affection, she is very much gravitated towards them, and she cannot help developing romantic feelings for all 3 of them. This is one of the most unique books I have ever read because of the nature of Tiernan's relationship with each of these guys. Another thing to note is that before going into this book, I did not know that Tiernan was 17. Why did I not know that? I thought we were going to be following like a woman at least in her 20s, but no, she's still a teenager at the beginning of this book. She eventually does turn 18. But she's doing stuff with these guys while she is still a minor. So keep that in mind before going into this book if you're interested in reading it, that there will be some underage activities going on in this book between her and men who are older than her. I did not know that before going into this one. So yeah, keep that in mind. So Jake is her step uncle and Noah and Caleb are her step cousins. So the relationship was never an issue for me because they're not blood related, and she never grew up with these guys because Jake was estranged from the family. So she had never met them before then. So there's no like real weirdness going on. The reason that this does make for a taboo book though is because, like I mentioned, Tiernan is still 17 and she does develop a sexual relationship with Jake, who is like in his 30s. So there is some borderline going on in this book, so that's another thing to keep in mind. But although there's a lot of taboo things going on within these romances, I was still blown away by the chemistry that Tiernan had with these guys. So weird to say that, but they're like, the chemistry just emanated off the page. She develops individual deep connections to each of these guys that had my heart racing. The characters individually were so well fleshed out that they were without a doubt the strongest factor about this book. Tiernan has always felt neglected by her parents and never seen by them, and so when each of these guys show her a lot of care, she instantly latches onto them in the form of physical intimacy, because it's in those moments that she feels very much connected to them, and in those moments she feels so loved by them. Sadly, the reason that I knocked this one down a star, I gave this book 4 stars, is because the transition to Tiernan having feelings for all 3 of these guys to her only having feelings for one of them was very abrupt. This is a reverse harem. This is not a why choose. So she does end up with only one of the guys at the end, which is fine, but she so suddenly fell out of love with the other 2 that the transition to her only loving one of them did not feel natural to me when the connections to the other 2 as well had been so strong. I wish there had been more closure to the end of those romantic relationships instead of her just being like, oh, not into them anymore, I'd rather just go with this guy. It just did not make sense to me, and it's for that reason that it makes me wonder if I would like a why choose, because I have never liked the idea of a why choose romance, because it seems unreal to me that someone would feel the same romantic feelings for multiple people, even though I know that's something that happens in real life. And I'm not judging anyone who chooses to fall in love with more than one person at once, like, and wants relationships with each of them. Not judging, but it's just not something that I can wrap my head around, because I feel like romantic love is something that I myself could only ever hold for one person at a time. So I just could never understand like why chooses. So for that reason, I've been thinking for a while that I would never be into a why choose romance. But since I was finding myself thinking it would make more sense for her to hold the same love for each of these guys, it makes me wonder if I should try a why choose book and see how it goes. Because maybe I would like it. I don't know. But this book kind of made me realize that. And the guy that she did end up with at the end was not my first choice. I feel like he had the least development out of all these guys. He eventually does go through some development and we get to know more about him, but it takes a while for us to get to know more about him. And so because he was the guy that I felt the least connected to, I was kind of like, really? You're going to choose him? So there was also that. I also wasn't a big fan of the guy that she did choose. Lastly, I have to mention that I loved the wilderness setting that took place in this book in Colorado, like on the mountains. I have been to Colorado, so I know like the aesthetic that this book is going for with the whole like rural wilderness setting, and I absolutely loved it. Penelope Douglas described the Colorado wilderness setting so freaking well. I could like visually, like in my head, picture it so well. She did such a great job with describing the setting. So I thought this would be a 5-star book because I was absolutely engrossed in this book. Throughout the first half, like I could not put it down. I read 200 pages of this book straight, and that is so rare for me. I like lost track of the amount of pages that I was reading because I was so hooked on what was going on. So I thought this would be a 5-star book because I could not put it down. I was so into what was happening. But the last 75% of this book kind of went just slightly downhill, so I couldn't overall give it a 5-star. But I still enjoyed this one immensely, and the steamy scenes are steaming. They actually like kind of blew my mind, and there were so many moments throughout the spicy scenes where I was like, what the hell am I reading? The couch scene, you guys, if you read this book, the couch scene, like what the hell was that? What was that? I wish I had vlogged my reaction to reading this book, because the couch scene, man, had me like my mind whirling because I could not believe what I was reading. So yeah, the spicy scenes were very crazy. There is a group activity going on in this book as well, which that's not something I ever read about in books. So when that was happening, I was like, what? Oh my God. I gotta put this down because I was physically fanning myself. I'm not even kidding. I was sweating. Like, the spicy scenes are crazy. So if you are into spice, like, you're gonna love this one. Like, if you're into really, really high spice, like, you're gonna like this one. And if you're also into taboo romances, then this is the book for you. I love taboo romance books, so I was eating this up. I know a lot of people don't, and this book definitely is not going to be for everyone. That is without a doubt. So definitely read the trigger warnings that come along with this book, because it is for sure not for everyone, but it was for me. It was for me, and I don't know what that says about me, but I enjoyed it. So yeah, I'm glad I finally read this one. It is a solid 4 out of 5 stars. Now, the last book I read is this is the second 2025 recent release that I read. First Time Caller was one of them. So I'm glad I also read another new release this month, and that is Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. So this one follows Scarlett, who is a med student at Stanford, and she's a professional diver on the side. She's an overachiever who has felt like she's lost a lot of control because a lot of her grades are plummeting, and she has struggled to perfect the perfect dive since obtaining an injury during a competition. And we're also following Lucas, who is a professional swimmer. And after Scarlett and Lucas become aware that they are both into BDSM. They agree to have a strictly sexual relationship, and Scarlett initially agrees to it, hoping that it'll be a release from how out of control her life feels. But Scarlett and Lucas realize how compatible they are with each other in other ways, and they realize how much they cannot be without each other. Before going into this book, I had no idea that we're following BDSM. No idea. And it was crazy reading this book right after reading Credence, because I got to thinking, what kind of books am I picking up lately? Because Credence was crazy with its content, and then this ends up being crazy with its content, and I'm like, what's going on? Why do I keep picking up these kind of books? So yeah, I just thought this was going to be a really like cute romance, but these characters are into kinky stuff and I had no idea. So yeah, before going into this, keep in mind that it does cover these characters like talking about their kinks and wanting to do them, so keep that in mind before going into this one, because I had no idea. But despite the fact that these two are into BDSM, I found the sex scenes in this book to be pretty tame, actually. There's some dirty talk between them and some like rough handling, but that's about it. So if you are someone who like isn't into BDSM, take it from me, this is just my perspective. The sex scenes in here were pretty like not all the way vanilla, but not, there wasn't any like floggers or like tying each other up. There was none of that. This book is not 50 Shades of Grey, so those scenes were not like as hardcore as you would think they would be. And if you are someone who is like going into this book thinking that it's going to be like 50 Shades of Grey, you might be disappointed, because these sexy times are not really detailed like that. So also keep that in mind. And so because there was not any like hardcore BDSM in this book, it left me very confused, because the characters talked about their kinks and wanting to do them, but they never actually do them. So I was like, wait, I thought they were into BDSM, but there's no like tying each other up. There's no like instruments being used. So I was kind of confused. But I'm someone who is not into that kind of thing at all in real life. I will never be interested in BDSM, so maybe I just don't like understand the whole world, and I'm thinking that BDSM is only something that is hardcore. So maybe that's just me and my perspective being not correct. But yeah, I was really confused because I thought they were going to be a lot more rougher with each other, but they really aren't. I really liked following our main character Scarlett, and I felt for her struggle with being an overachiever but feeling so out of control with everything that is going on with her life. She struggles with trying to maintain her grades as well as being a proficient diver. She has so much on her plate with both that I can't even imagine maintaining the load that she has. And it doesn't help that she's a perfectionist and measures her worth on what she can do, but I really loved watching her thinking towards that sway from what it originally was, and that's something that Lucas helps her a lot with, and I love him for that. But she starts to realize that her worth isn't measured on if she is getting good grades, like perfect grades, or being the best diver in the world. She starts to find that her worth is measured on who she is as a person, and I believe that's something that everyone can learn and take away from. And I found it interesting that the reason that she's into BDSM is because she likes how it's structured, and as someone who constantly feels the need to be in control, that structure gives her a release from the chaos that's going on in her life. Lucas ended up being a refreshing person for Scarlett to be around because he is a competitor as a swimmer, but he isn't too focused on his worth as a swimmer, and that's something that Scarlett could learn from. And I loved how he helped her out of her mental block when it came to diving, so that then she could succeed at it. And their relationship started off as just sexual, but they were pretty much dating from the start without even realizing it, because their emotional connection was so strong and present throughout. And I loved watching Scarlett realize that she actually did have true feelings towards him. I feel like Lucas all along kind of knew that he felt like love for Scarlett, but it takes a while for Scarlett to realize that. And I loved eventually seeing these two come together and realizing, hey, we don't only like each other because we both have similar kinks. We actually love each other as well. It was so sweet. I did feel like the writing was too fast paced at times, and the scene transitions weren't really smooth. So I would prefer the writing to be a little bit more slower, which is weird to say because usually it's slow pacing and writing that really makes a book drag for me, and I don't like that. But this book felt a little too fast paced actually, so I would have liked it to be a bit slower. And the academic talk throughout this book went so over my head, and I know that Ali Hazelwood books focus around STEM, like pretty much I think all of her books focus around it, so I knew that there would be a lot of academic talk going into this one, but all the scenes where Scarlett and Lucas were like doing their science projects, all those scenes went way over my head. I'm like, I don't know what like you're referring to. I don't understand the lingo you guys are using. So that was just a me problem because I am not a very academic person at all. So I'm like, I don't know what you guys are talking about, but that's okay. That's just a me issue. I enjoyed this, and I would be so down to pick up more books by Ali Hazelwood. This is the only book that I have ever read from her so far, but I've always wanted to check out her books. So I'm so glad that I finally did with her most recent release. I think the next book that I'm going to read from her will be Bride, because I'm really interested in that one. It is a paranormal romance, so I think it's something that I would like, but I definitely want to check out more books from her. I give this one a 4 out of 5 stars. So those were all the books that I read in February. It's so crazy that I only read 6 books this month, but I have been recording for over an hour. You just have to expect if you're gonna watch one of my videos, especially my monthly wrap-ups, I will make them pretty long because I just love to go into detail about all my thoughts about each of these books. So yeah, I babbled a lot, but I really enjoyed talking about these ones, and I hope you guys enjoyed hearing my thoughts on all of these books. Let me know if you've read any of these. I would love to know your thoughts on them, and I guess that's it for me. I will be back with a new video next week. See you then. Bye.